G'day, hobbyists, and welcome back to The Hobby, the podcast where we explore all things related to hobbies and passions, from trading cards to pop culture and everything else in between. I'm Dean Allsop, your host, and as always, I am joined by the one, the only, the Colonel. Leroy.
What's happening, Dino? What's happening, hobbyists?
How are you, my friend?
I'm always well, mate. Always well. I'm actually selling a few of my collectibles at the moment.
Yeah, not to me.
No, definitely not to you.
He's got a Rayquaza that he won't sell me. He's an absolute worst mate.
Market price $1,400. Low. The offer came in a little bit lower than that.
I mean, you're not going to sell it to me anyway, right? Because it makes up your master set for your Evolving Skies.
Master set, yeah.
But I know you are trying to sell right now. It's like $6,000 or something. That's like crazy.
Yeah.
What they're going for, dude.
Yeah, on our previous episode, we spoke about the bull market and what's happening in Pokemon.
Yeah.
And it's a really good time to move an Evolving Skies master set. So,
yeah. Well, PSA 10 Moonbryon is now at $2,800.
Crazy.
Like a bunch of sales.
Crazy.
Just nuts, dude.
Yeah, the raise at about $1,700. In the Beckett, it's about $1,800.
Yeah.
On top of the master set. So yeah.
I found a raw one last night. I messaged the guy. He actually didn't write back. I should message him again. Because that's what I want to try. I want to, I like to sort of buy nice raw cards and grade them myself. So that's what I'm going to try and do, since you won't sell me yours at mates rates.
Buy the whole master set and you can have it.
Well, then what am I going to do? I need to buy another Ray anyway to sell it as a master set.
That's a good flip. There's some room for you in there.
$4,000.
Thor?
Yeah.
Wouldn't get out of bed for $4,000.
You don't get out of bed before 10 a.m. anyway. It's a struggle to speak to you before lunchtime.
Yeah, it's because I'm busy working.
Oh, yeah, on sleep, beauty sleep. But that's enough from us, guys. Today is a guest episode, and today is a big guest episode. You can see Leroy's hat over there. We are lucky enough to have the co-founder, one of the two co-founders from Whatnot, joining us on today's episode. We're going to dive into him, how the whole business and everything sort of was created, where it's at, and what it's going to look like for Australia. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest. Today we have a very special guest joining us, Logan Head, the co-founder of Whatnot, the live streaming commerce platform that has revolutionized how people buy and sell collectibles. Logan's work has been instrumental in creating a space where communities and collectors can connect, engage, and share their passion for everything from trading cards to vintage items. We're excited to hear about his journey, the evolution of Whatnot, and his insights into the future of the collectibles market. Logan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Super happy to be here. And more importantly, I'm very excited about Australia.
Oh, we are insanely excited as well. Whatnot's introduction to the Australian community has absolutely exploded in every possible positive way that it could.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, I think we've been in Australia for about 7 weeks, and really sort of our goal is to pilot it for probably the next 6 or 7 weeks, and then really start kind of putting things into gear. So for context, right now, we actually don't have anyone who is physically in Australia. And so we're hiring a few different roles, and sort of the hopes are to sort of fill those roles in the next 2 to 3 months. But we also have someone coming from the US to jumpstart things in January. And so I think you guys are going to see, even though there's been a lot of momentum in the past 6 or 7 weeks that we've been live in Australia, there's going to be much more, specifically having someone on the ground focused on marketing and all the other efforts.
That is an insanely exciting prospect, because in this 7-week beta period, it feels like we have everything that we could need already. So to know that, there's a whole nother level or echelon to come in January with the full official launch is super, super exciting.
Yeah, agreed. And like I said, the early signs of sort of what of us launching into Australia, I actually didn't anticipate how well it would be received, and it seems to be going really well. So
yeah, it's amazing to be able to be testing that and seeing how exciting it is as a streamer. Logan, before we get stuck into the crux of what Whatnot is and the business, our viewers out there no doubt are going to know a little bit about you. So do you want to talk just a little bit about your childhood and some of your interests growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Arizona, a suburb of Phoenix, which is called Scottsdale. And so I don't know how familiar everyone is with Arizona, but it's very hot in the summer. And yeah, I mean, my childhood was interesting. I always sort of had an interest in businesses and so forth, but really where my passion was actually computers. So when I was a kid, some of the things I would do, besides not go to school, I always took school not very seriously and was a terrible student. If you ask my parents, they would say I was a terrible kid. But that being said, I really liked computers. And so when I was, I think 6 or 7, I got my first computer from my grandparents. That just sparked a whole nother interest. I wanted to really learn how things worked. And so I would say probably by the time I hit age 12, I started sort of learning how to code on the side, and just like building simple websites, putting plugins for MySpace back in the day, which was a thing. And that was like kind of the start of actually learning about how sort of, a lot of this stuff works. And so yeah, and principally, I'm a self-taught, programmer. And as a result of me being a terrible student, I actually never did well in school in general. So for the university I went to, I actually went out to Missoula, Montana. And so for context, Missoula, Montana, no diss on that university. It's not a great school. I primarily went there because I wanted to be close to a ski mountain, and so I could ski and not go to class as well. And it was really good. And I also kind of found a passion for just enjoying the outdoors. So hiking, which is something I actually don't do as much, camping, backpacking, and skiing, which was kind of like my biggest passion back in the day. And so, yeah, so for school, it was just, terrible student. But that's okay. I always had sort of a belief that you learn more by doing than sitting in a classroom. And so yeah.
That regular school model didn't really sound like it was a fit for you. Programming at the age of 12 probably isn't the most common thing. Getting out there on the slopes. Did you have any big influences when you were younger? Anyone that you looked up to?
Yeah, actually it was my grandpa. So my grandpa, he's now probably about 86 years old. He's a great person, very entrepreneurial. He started a company that actually went public. In terms of his background, he had a legal background. So he was a lawyer for many years of his life. And then started this title company in Arizona that eventually went public. And I think, seeing sort of his sort of entrepreneurial journey really sort of inspired me of like, you can create pretty much anything. And as long as you build something that people generally like, it could potentially have some effect on things, and you can generally kind of create something that works really well. So I would say, yeah, my grandpa was probably, out of anyone in the world, was definitely like the person I looked up to the most.
Yeah, that's an amazing influence when you sort of explain it like that, and you look at what you've done and what you've achieved. I find it interesting because usually, you said you were very sort of outdoorsy in terms of skiing, camping, and hiking. Usually somebody that's into that doesn't necessarily start coding at the age of 12. So I love the sort of spark kind of difference there. A quick question too, because I'm 36 years old and I would have zero idea how to code. You figured it out when you were 12. If somebody was interested in going down that path, how would they go about that?
Yeah, the way I would do it, and this is maybe from my past experience of how I sort of taught myself how to do these things, is I would have an idea, and with that particular idea, I wanted to figure out every little thing I had to do to be able to accomplish that. More or less me doing it myself. And so, some of the ideas would be like a simple plugin to, at one point in college, I developed this, sort of like radio slash, think of it as like SoundCloud, but kind of like a radio of SoundCloud. SoundCloud did it way better. But, I wanted to figure out every little detail of how to actually build that end to end myself. And that was probably the best boot camp. And so a lot of it was, reading a lot, trial by error. I think college made it a little bit easier than when I was an actual kid, because you had resources like YouTube, and sort of like the community specifically within developing was a lot more established than when I was a kid. So the access to content and resources was much better. Nowadays, I don't know how effective it is just because I've never been in these things, but they have boot camps where you go 3 to 6 months and all you're doing is learning how to sort of build things. And I know that's been effective for many people. But yeah, I think, if you really want to truly understand something, have an idea and figure out everything you can to sort of actually implement that end to end yourself. and it'll take a long time, but that's okay.
So I guess it's probably a good time to sort of go back to your time in university and just, I guess, reminisce or see if there's any memories that come to light about the journey in that part of your life that has sort of gotten you to where you are now, or with Whatnot. What did you, when you went to that university in Montana, what were you studying, and what were your aspirations at that point in time?
Yeah, so I was studying management information systems, which essentially think of it as like project management for business around kind of like IT and so forth. And so the reason I chose that degree was just because it was a business related degree, and I knew I wanted to get into business. But in terms of my sort of backstory of the university, I actually did it for a full year. Then I dropped out for a few years to start a business, and I can talk about more about what that business was. I think it sort of gave me more of a aspiration towards technology and how that can impact many people's lives. But for context, and not a lot of people know this about me, but since we're really kind of like diving into the college era, I actually started one of the very first medical marijuana dispensaries in Montana. And so this is way back in the day where medical marijuana in the US was kind of taking off. And so it was very big in California. This is before it became legalized. And then in Montana, it was something that was very new, where there was new sort of laws that you can sort of grow medical marijuana for particular people who had sort of these cards that enabled them to have access to it. And so the difference between California or Montana back in the day was that in California, you can go to a bunch of different shops to get your medical marijuana, but in Montana, you can only designate one particular person. And so that particular person had to, one, just be someone who wasn't a felon. And if that was the case, they can grow up to 6 plants for you. And so the law was actually very loose. And so, I found and thought of this as an opportunity to make money on the side while I was in college. And so I actually was able to get a few patients who had cards who designated me as their caregiver. And that was really interesting. And so one day, which was probably a year into college, the attorney general at the time, his name was Eric Holder, they said, if you're following state law, the federal government won't mess with you, because it's still even today federally illegal. And I saw that as an opportunity. I said, well, there's nothing in the law that says I can't have a storefront. So how about I go open up a storefront next week, which I did. And as a result of this could be a place where people could designate me as their caregiver. So back then it was a caregiver, and I could grow 6 plants for each of these patients. And so I did that for about 2.5 years. And what's interesting about that, because we were pretty much the first people to ever have a physical storefront in Montana, is within a few months, we had a waiting list, just because we could not grow the amount of cannabis that was like necessary for all the patients who wanted access to us. And so I think within 3 or 4 months, we had 200 patients. Then within a year, we had 600 patients, and then we had a waiting list of 1,000. And so that really expanded quickly. But one of the things that really stuck out to me during this experience was a lot of the software that sort of managed the day to day of, not Whatnot. It was called Zoom Out Natural Care. That was the name of the dispensary. Was really sort of this self-built, easy software that I built to kind of manage the operations. And so the way we had it work was you could check in with the receptionist, and there was kind of this door where you get buzzed into, and you would be greeted by someone. And what these people were called, we didn't call them bud tenders. We called them patient services associates. But what would happen is they would scan their ID with the receptionist, and that would send something to the back, to the patient services associate. And that person would have a whole history of like what this person likes, have they bought in the past, and what is their name. And so that person would come up, greet, let's say their name is Kathy and so, and say, hey, Kathy, how's it going today? I remember last week you bought this lollipop, and we have more in stock. Do you want some more? And so that sort of like personal connection through like technology was really eye-opening. One thing that really sucks about this, even though I did it for about 2.5 years, was Montana was the first state in all of the U.S. to actually reverse the medical marijuana law. It's now legal there. And so that was a really kind of devastating time for us, because we put a lot of effort and energy However, I realized like my passion isn't really marijuana. It was really just an outlet to sort of build a business and figure out how to make something amazing for users. And so I took probably about 6 months off, and then I went back to school for another, I don't know, maybe 2.5 years, and I ended up dropping out of college again. But but yeah, that was kind of, I would say, I would say that was kind of like my sort of introduction into business and me really understanding how powerful things can be, specifically if you streamline things through technology and very simple products that can be built. Because that sort of whole operational software that was built very easily was very game changing, because like people went there and they felt like, you know, these people care, and we did care, but it was that very personalized connection that really amplified things.
What year would that have been?
So let's see, it's 2024. It would have been in 2010.
That's wild.
So a long time ago.
I reckon medical marijuana is probably in the last 12 months or maybe max 24 months has become a thing in Australia. So it just shows, you know, that's like what, 12 to 13 years later that something like that makes its way over here. So at least Whatnot was only like, what, 3.5 years, 4 years. We didn't have to wait 14 years for it to come to Australia.
Yeah, that's true. But, you know, it's interesting, like, you know, things do change quite a bit. And so in the US, it's pretty much legal in every state. It's still not federally legal. But, you know, what I can see is like the government isn't really cracking down from a federal perspective on it, which is good. And, you know, I would predict in the next 2 years, it's federally legal.
Yeah. I love that you took us back there, because my next sort of question was going to be, talk us through your previous workplaces and companies and businesses prior to Whatnot. Yeah. So I guess after that medical marijuana company, you go back to college. Where do you then find yourself after that? Where is the next place of work that you end up at?
Yeah, so I went back to college, and I probably did it for about 2 years. And sort of towards the end of school, I had this particular internship that led into a full-time job at sort of my first official tech company. And when I mean tech company, it was really a startup. And so I was their first intern that turned into their first employee. And this was a Montana-based tech company, which is very rare, because if you look at tech companies today, you know, they're very sort of concentrated in Silicon Valley or other hubs like New York City, Los Angeles, and so forth. And so I sort of had the fortunate position to get this internship with a very early company that most recently got out of this program called Y Combinator. And I don't know how familiar you all with Y Combinator, but Y Combinator has sort of helped founders build some of the most remarkable companies. And some of the ones that are probably top of mind that you all know of is Airbnb, Coinbase, DoorDash, Instacart. Like the list goes on and on.
Is it a VC company? Is that the one that I'm thinking of, where you basically you can as a founder go to that company and sort of pitch what it is you're doing, and it's like a seed round or a finance round? Is that
it's a little bit different. So the way it works is, you know, you apply to get accepted, and the difference between, you know, getting seed money is these investors are not involved in the day to day, and what they sort of teach you to do is like really think about how to build a business and how to think about getting to product market fit. And so what happens is, you know, there's X amount of companies that get applied or that get accepted every batch. And you actually go out to Mountain View, and now it's actually in San Francisco, but it used to be in Mountain View. And you're there in person working with a bunch of founders, and they pair you up with group partners who have done things in the past, such as scaled, you know, a company like Whatnot. And it has done sort of something that, you know, allows them to give the right guidance to founders. But it's really sort of also a way of thinking about how to build a business and how to sort of operate in that early stage mentality to, you know, where we are today. It's a lot different in terms of like the way you think about things, but principally a lot of things are aligned and generally the same. So yeah, it was really cool because I didn't know much about the program, and then just kind of like meeting these founders that I was working with, it was a really cool experience because I got to work on so many different things. It wasn't necessarily just isolated to one thing. It was, you know, you're wearing multiple hats. You're trying to solve the biggest problems for your users. You're talking to your users constantly. And so it was through that I think I found my passion that like someday I wanted to start a startup. I just didn't feel like I was ready. And for me to be ready, I wanted to sort of get as much experience as possible. But yeah, to your point of like what happened after college, I actually worked there for a couple years, and then I moved out to New York City. And in New York City is actually where I met my co-founder, Grant. And so Grant, his background is not on sort of like the engineering side, but more on the operations and marketing side and product side of technology. And so, when we met, I think at the time he was at Google, he was working at YouTube as like a product marketer. And him and I sort of really we never actually worked at a company together, but we always had like these ideas that we would bounce off each other. And we knew just kind of like through that energy and the things that we were talking about that someday we would start a company together. We just didn't know when the stars would align. And so, I would say this was probably a little over 5.5 years ago when we decided that we're going to leave our jobs and start Whatnot, which was ultimately the right decision. But we wanted to sort of, one, make sure we felt comfortable doing this because we both had high paying jobs. And two, we wanted to make sure we had enough money in the bank that would allow us to sort of prove out our concept over time. But I can get into the sort of whole origin story of Whatnot in a sec. But yeah, basically in terms of when I was in New York City, I really focused on the earlier to growth stage startups. So I primarily did everything from backend engineering to mobile engineering to DevOps, which is like infrastructure work and so forth. And I would say I became okay at most things. I never became an expert at anything in particular, but gained enough knowledge in all these little things that really allowed Whatnot to be possible from a technology standpoint.
I love that. Picking up as much knowledge as you can along the way, basically setting yourself up to do what you guys have done. And then, when you sort of get the company rolling in that, then you can hire people that know how to do those things a little bit better than you do. And, you let them worry about it and you just sort of oversee the whole operation because you've got a bit of an understanding. You and Grant, I don't think you mentioned it there, but how did you guys actually meet? Did you meet like in a bar or something? Like, is there a cool story how you two came together? Like, what was the first thing you said to each other? I always find it funny because even Lee shot me a message on Facebook Messenger and just said, "Hey, legend," and I was like, "I don't even know you, dude." Yeah. And that's now we're like best mates building our businesses together. So you and Grant, what was that first interaction?
Yeah, so we met each other through mutual friends that we had, and so I believe the first time we actually did meet was at a bar, and then over the course of a few years, just became really close friends and would go on various trips together. Actually, like the whole idea that we wanted to start a company, we didn't know it would be called Whatnot, but a company of some sort we were in a bar in Japan, in Tokyo, and super jet lagged, and we were drinking an old fashioned, and we were just, I don't know, our brains were kind of not working, but we're like, we should quit our jobs at some point and start a company. And 6 months later we did. And so, yeah, but I think it was a really good relationship. And there were some things I think we've done in the past to be able to prove that we can work well together. So even though we hadn't worked at a company together, we had worked on projects that was not ever the intention to sort of leave our jobs at the time. It was more like, how do we actually make additional income in addition to our jobs? And so that was a really good testament in terms of how we work together. And Whatnot is a whole different story, but it's been good. And I think, the thing that works really well is our skill sets really complement each other. So, a lot of the things he does on the day to day as a CEO, I would never want to fucking do. I think the things that we complement each other and have really good, sort of shared understanding is like the product and the direction we want to go with the company. And I think that works really well.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal.
I think the takeaway so far, and I kind of want to point this out to our listeners as well, is you've every step along the way, even though your paths have changed, you've jumped in with both feet, gone to uni, left uni, started a business, jumped back in uni. And I think that's where some people get stuck sometimes. And I just kind of want to speak to the listeners here because you're currently listening to a guest who has started a company, a successful company, and there's lots of people out there that are toying with that idea. So just as we continue through the podcast, listen to that because you're putting all the pieces together at the moment, and as you're talking it, I'm going, oh, now I see why Whatnot's user interface is so good. Now I see why their customer service is so good. And then hearing how you and Grant complement each other as well in terms of different skill sets, it's a bit of yin and yang there. Do you have any early startup stories? Let's get into Whatnot now. You said that you started talking in Japan. There was, those conversations in a bar. Let's get into it now.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I think when we met you, Logan, when you were in Australia, and you and I were having a chat, I think I brought up the Uber show on Netflix. I was like, everybody imagines this is what a startup is. It's like, you hit the jackpot and everybody's like partying and having a crazy time. Is all startups like that, or was it literally just Uber?
I don't know what Uber's culture was like. What I would say is probably TV shows aren't accurately representing what it was like on the day to day. I would imagine that people were working their ass off and sure, maybe celebrating milestones. One of the things, and I actually started watching this a week ago because it's such a good TV show, and I do see a lot of similarities to some degree, is if you've ever seen the HBO show called Silicon Valley, which is a hilarious satire comedy on tech, and there are some very like good, I would say, parallels in terms of how we've sort of built things. But I think, in terms of sort of, what people might see on TV, like every startup goes through their ups and downs, and it's brutally hard. And so I don't know in terms of like Uber's actual story, and kind of, we have a lot of people who worked at Uber, specifically early Uber. We've also had people who worked at WeWork and went to that notorious, party that, I don't know if you've ever seen the WeWork documentary, but, I think, startups are interesting, and, they are a grind. And it comes with a whole unforeseen set of challenges every day that you have to sort of be able to navigate, and you have to be okay with. And so, but yeah, in terms of startup stories, I think you're asking me, is there like anything memorable, or is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just take us back to the start now of Whatnot. You said that 6 months later you quit your jobs and you jumped into Whatnot. But just talk through the startup process, getting feet on the ground, the sacrifice that went into creating it. I don't imagine it was built overnight like Rome.
And the name, I've always wondered, I love name origin stories.
Great. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to build a marketplace of some sort. We didn't necessarily know exactly in Japan what that marketplace would be, but, after bouncing a few ideas, this sort of big idea that we had that is actually not what it is today was we wanted to build more or less this localized marketplace built around safety. And so if you look at Craigslist, for instance, and I don't know if Craigslist is a thing in Australia, I doubt it is, but it's a very platform where you list something and then you can go meet up with someone on the streets and collect it. So there's no way of transaction. So you can't actually pay for something with a credit card. You go meet up with someone and pay cash for that product, and then you get it. And we're let's make a safer version of that, where there's sort of this middle layer, where, it's more or less this localized, marketplace, and it's really built around safety. And we did a lot of diligence, and I actually started programming it. And I think about 6 weeks into it, actually programming it. And this was actually when I was still at my job as well. Grant was like, I don't think this model works, to actually get this to scale and make a real business out of this. It's going to require a lot of capital that we need to raise. And the unit economics behind this is not very good. And so we started ideating on what is something else that we could do that's a little bit easier and doesn't require a lot of capital to spin up. And Grant was looking at eBay one day. He noticed that there were these little pop vinyl figurines all over eBay. And we realized, actually, I see these all over my coworker's desk. And they were these things called Funko Pops. And looking really deep into Funko Pops on eBay, because a lot of the sales data is public, we noticed on eBay that there were more Funko Pops being sold than comic books. And this is in 2019. And then Grant and I started visiting kind of the local LA comic book stores. And we noticed that in these comic book stores, there were more Funko Pops and actual comic books. Then we started researching the community and noticed how fragmented the communities were, where, people were on Discord to Facebook groups to Instagram to eBay, but nothing really like kind of brought that community together. And we actually, we started buying these things and thought like, this is pretty cool. I like Funko, and Grant started to like Funko too, or we're like, let's build an amazing experience for this group of users. And really what we're building is a community driven marketplace. Because if you look at marketplaces today, like eBay, Mercari, StockX, I know that was in Australia. I don't know if it still is. It's all focused on the underlying transaction, but not the community. And so how do you really leverage the community through commerce? And that was really kind of what we intended to build. And so, in terms of naming, this is a funny story, but I also am very embarrassed by it. Grant and I are very bad at any like brand related things, specifically when it comes to naming something. And so we wanted to build something, around the community that was safe. And so we were thinking, okay, well, legit is a interesting name. Can we buy legit.com? No, it costs a lot of money. And so we actually bought alwayslegit.com. And we were planning on launching Whatnot as always legit. Thank God we didn't. However, we had a designer that was working for us. And he used to work with Grant at a different startup, and he pulled us aside and said, guys, the name is terrible. And I don't think I can work at a company like this. Like, we should do an exercise of how do we, find a good name that actually works. And so he sort of did a whole dump on like, what are domains that are available that we could potentially buy, and how does that sort of attribute to what we're building? And, we go, I think, domain by domain, name by name, and everyone sort of like resonated on Whatnot. However, we noticed that, in order to buy Whatnot, we actually had to sort of pay for Bitcoin in it. And the guy who was selling it only wanted Bitcoin. But if you think about sort of domains and transferring domains, it's a little bit sketchy to sort of use Bitcoin. And so what we did was we hired this sort of escrow domain service that built the feature of supporting Bitcoin just for this transaction. And I think at the time Grant had some Bitcoin, and the guy at the time only wanted half a Bitcoin. Half a Bitcoin at that point of time was worth $6,000. And so we used this escrow service. They accepted our Bitcoin. And then initially we got a domain back to us, and it was a wrong domain. It was whynot.com, not whatnot.com. And so we emailed them back, and luckily the escrow service got it resolved, and we got whatnot.com. I wish we kept whynot.com and also bought whatnot.com, but yeah, that's kind of the
Whatnot could work.
Yeah.
I mean, Whatnot is the idyllic name, though. I mean, Lee in particular has started to notice how much he says the word whatnot in a day-to-day conversation, not actually talking about whatnot.
But yeah, it was a really lucky thing to get whatnot.com, and I think it works really well for what we're doing.
Today's episode is brought to you by Collectfest, Australia's new and biggest collectibles festival, held here in Melbourne with over 300 stands, with many, many more to come. We've got some big exhibitors like the Royal Australian Mint, Kink Comics, Luna Cards, Anime Works, and many, many other small businesses.
These events are going to be held at the premier convention centers in each city and encompassing all collectibles from comics, video games, gaming, sneakers, trading cards, toys, and much more. If you can collect it, it will be there. Gary Hayes, King Pokemon, courtesy of Collectfest and us here at the Hobby Podcast, is actually going to be at the Melbourne show, and we have some super exciting announcements to come. You're not going to want to miss Gary's first trip down under. Melbourne, 5th to 6th of July, 2025. Brisbane, 26th to 27th of July. Sydney, 23rd to 24th of August.
So make sure you jump online, grab your tickets at collectfest.com.au. That's collectfest.com.au, and don't miss out.
This is going to be a phenomenal beginning for a new convention in Australia. I mean, the one in Melbourne is going to be held at the Melbourne Exhibition and Convention Centre. So we're super, super excited for that. We look forward to seeing you there. We will be there.
You've got the name. You've started. Talk us through getting it off the ground. What did those early days look like in terms of building out Whatnot?
Yeah. So, what we wanted to sort of do was test not necessarily the supply side, which means getting sellers to list product, was like, how can we test the demand side and how can we bootstrap this in the quickest way possible? So what we did, and the experience is quite a bit different than what it is today, was we sort of built more or less this modern day eBay with a social component to it. So if you opened up Whatnot 5 years ago today and you're using the app, think of it as like an Instagram feed. And in the feed, you would see like listings. And then you could like the listing, you could comment on the listing, you could follow a particular user. But what we did, which, we wanted to prove out, because I think like the trickiest thing for a marketplace is like that cold start problem is, can you get supply and can you get demand? And so if we could get supply, more than likely we could get demand. And so what we did was, we actually sort of scraped all of eBay. And we figured out a market price for every single Funko Pop. And so, I think there's thousands and thousands of Funko Pops back in the day. And so I built this thing that would look at historical sales and based off of the historical sales would say, okay, this is what I think the market price is. And so what we would do is we would create these listings that would be of these Funko Pops. And what we would do is we would list it at a price that we think we could get it from another marketplace like Mercari or eBay, and then buy it if someone purchased that. And so, actually surprisingly, people were buying these things and we would go, scavenge the internet to go purchase it for them in the condition that it was listed as. And the way the service worked back then was similar to like StockX and Goat, where we authenticated everything. So everything would come to us and we would physically authenticate it. So this model actually worked because, we purchase the product from eBay, it gets shipped to us, we authenticate it, then we ship it to the buyer. And so that was something that was really interesting. And, obviously that model changed over time because to scale that, it was very hard to do, but things were kind of working. Not nearly like what it was today, but we're like, okay, well, we've solved the demand side. So now how do we actually get the supply side, like new sellers? And actually, how do we make it even better of a prop value than eBay? And so what we did was we had a wait list, kind of like what we do today, is we allowed people to apply the wait list and then they could start selling Funko Pops. And when they were approved to buy or to sell Funko Pops, they would list their inventory. But what's sort of the value prop of Whatnot, right? Besides the community. Because like the thing that sellers care most about is being able to liquidate their inventory as quickly as possible. And so what we would do is as soon as it hit us, we would cross-list it back to eBay. And so ultimately there was two sales channels and our users didn't necessarily know that this was happening, but we would sell it on Whatnot if the sales happen on Whatnot, and it would sell on eBay as well. And so there's kind of two different areas that was getting cross-listed. That is no longer a thing anymore. But yeah, it worked really well to sort of solve that like supply and demand problem. And, over time, I would say, this is before we actually got into live. If you were sort of a hardcore Funko Pop collector, you were using Whatnot and you were either buying or you were selling or doing both.
I love that though. It's an ingenious way at the time to really dial in the user experience for the seller. Because like you said, the goal there is they want to be able to move their product as quickly as possible. And you, in secret, technically giving them two avenues to double down to give them that opportunity to move that product.
I tell you what, the bootstrapping makes me nervous. I see it sometimes with Pokemon cards these days where people pre-sell hits because they've got an allocation of product.
Yeah.
What happened in the instances where you had sold a product and couldn't get your hands on the condition? Was it just a refund, or
did that happen? Was it a common occurrence?
It happened many times, and 99% of the time we would still honor it. We would just take the loss. So like the thing that would happen would be if we found it for a price that was a lot higher than what our sort of market price was, we would just honor that. And with sort of the ambition of eventually just opening up supply where, we don't have to sort of scrape and cross list all these things from eBay. Like we'll have such an enormous amount of supply from other sellers. But that was kind of like the long-term goal, and it worked. Because, eventually I would say 2 months after we started allowing people to sell on Whatnot, we completely scrapped eBay entirely and sort of like that whole marketplace thing. And it was great because like we actually had a little bit more time to dedicate towards not just sourcing inventory, but doing other things that were very important to Whatnot.
So when you stopped doing eBay, what were the current viewers on the platform at that stage?
And users, yeah.
How many users did you have actively on the site?
Ooh, I don't even know because it was so long ago. But like I said, going back, look at the market of Funko back then. And if you were a hardcore enthusiast, maybe 40, 50,000.
Which is awesome. That's huge. That's huge. So from that point, how does Whatnot then become the live streaming behemoth of a platform that it is today?
Yeah. So, we continued to sort of double down on one category, which is Funko, and things were working pretty well, specifically with this more social, like eBay, bringing the community together from all these different things like Discord, you name it, and kind of like making one app to do everything. And so since we kind of did a good job at really getting the Funko community off the ground, we noticed that, and this was during COVID in 2020, that a lot of our sellers who were using Whatnot were also using Instagram as a way to sell product. And so what they would do is they would go on Instagram Live, and there would be a 10-second latency between me and you. And there would be these auctions that would happen, but people would place bids through comments. And so even though there was a 10-second delay between us, people love that experience. And like on top of that, if someone did win, that seller has to go outreach to that particular person who won that auction at whatever comment bid that they put. And they have to go back and forth and collect shipping information and payment information. And so we said, well, like, let's just build a better experience and see what happens. And I probably locked myself in my room for about 5 weeks to like build the first initial prototype of it. And, it was pretty clunky compared to what it is today. If you looked at, what it was something that I would say was a proof of concept, and we were able to validate it with our users very quickly. So we could determine, one, do we want to continue to invest in this or not? And so the first day, Grant and I go live for the very first live. And the way it worked was it was kind of like, how I talked about like the Instagram style feed where it'd be like these big photos. There was a little banner at the top that said, we're live. And the way it worked was like the only thing you could do is you could buy a product or you could, win through an auction. And, from a seller perspective, none of the things were built out. Like Grant couldn't add inventory into the live. I had to go do that through a command line, on my computer to be able to like add product that people could purchase. And so like none of the full functionality was built out. Within the course of 2 hours, it was a pretty thrill. Like I think it was pretty surprising and shocking to see what happened within those 2 hours. One, people were like, holy shit, this is amazing. This is way better than what I'm used to on Instagram, even though it was very like, hacked together and prototyped and something that would never sort of allow us to sort of continue and give in the hands of users. And we'd have to sort of like build it better. But we were able to sell, I think like $3,000 worth of product in 2 hours. And for us, I was just like, whoa, this is huge. $3,000 in 2 hours. And this is US dollars, not Australian dollars. We were like, we're onto something. but we're like, this is fascinating. This is something that, one is really exciting, and two, people really liked. And we asked feedback from people who are in that stream, and they're like, yes, this is really cool. And so we stopped everything that we were doing because of how thrilling and amazing that experience was. And we just doubled down on live. And so over the course of the next few months, started getting things much better from a product perspective. So like people could schedule shows, they could add products. And we started slowly opening up our wait list to, we started with one seller. It's kind of like with Australia, to 2, to 3, to 4, and started kind of scaling that up. And so, yeah, so for context, we started in Funko, and fast forward to today, we're in, over 100 categories. And so in the US, it's a lot different than an experience in Australia. And we hope we can get there in Australia soon. But like in the US, we sell everything from golf to beauty to handbags, to plants, to, you name it. Like it's just becoming, a plethora of things that you can buy. And it's really cool to see.
So. It really, I wanted to touch on that. I was hoping you were going to mention that, because I know that with the Australian users, they're kind of probably only aware of sort of what's going on in Australia at the moment. But another big one that I've seen in the US is, like vintage and luxury clothing and items like that. Like people will literally run a live stream and can run you through the condition of the item, the tags, the authenticity, and all that stuff. And you can see it there in like real time and either buy it now or like bid on it. And that as well is like, it's just a game changer.
Yeah. And it's really cool to see, because, a lot of these categories outside of that, that's something, we're actively focused on and have a team like helping grow those categories. But, as we've sort of expanded, and, like I said, we started with one category, then our second category was Pokemon. Our third category was sports, which is our biggest category, but also it was a very hard category to get off the ground. Because if you think about like the overlap of like a geeky Funko collector like myself to, also collecting sports cards, like, that sort of overlap didn't really happen. And so we almost had to build this sort of new user base. And so over time, as we've expanded into more and more categories like women's fashion and so forth, we've kind of built this moat where it's a lot easier, or if something just kind of organically happens and spins up, like rocks and crystals. Who knew that would be a category, but it's a big category on Whatnot. Like that sort of just naturally works because we built all these audiences and communities that, more than likely like or are passionate in more than one thing.
Yeah, and you definitely feel that if you go on to Whatnot and you jump into other categories and have a look around, you can see that the community side of it that I know you guys are focused on is relevant across all those categories. I've spent plenty of time in some of the bigger sports breakers buying plenty of cards from them, and those communities, they're very passionate. Everybody sort of gets around each other. Then you also kind of bully each other a little bit, have a little bit of fun, pick on each other depending on what teams. And but no, the timing, Logan, was something I can resonate with, because in 2020, when COVID hit here in Melbourne in Australia, we went through the longest and toughest lockdowns in the world. Mm-hmm. We were basically in lockdown for like almost 2 years. Like at 6 months and 9 months, and then a gap, and then like 3 months. It was insane. So we spent a lot of time inside and a lot of time online. And I used to not only jump into Facebook auctions, so very similar to the ones that you were saying on Instagram. That was basically what all the Pokemon communities did here, is we ran live auctions with that latency through Facebook. So I started by buying on all those and then obviously selling on those. But the user experience was, it was okay from a community aspect, but as the seller, it was an absolute nightmare trying to, fairly end an auction at a period of time because of the latency. You would need to use like a stopwatch or a clock or something to sort of go, all right, well, that was the last bid that I saw. That would be an issue. Then all the admin post that sort of that auction, like chasing everybody up and having different payment options and waiting for people to send stuff through, and then going to making your own shipping labels and all these things.
Following up payments.
Like we put up with it at that point in time because we didn't have another option. And then I think it must have been early 2021, I reckon, is probably when I came across Whatnot for the first time. And I started showing to everybody, I'm like, this is insane. This is so good. But obviously, at that point, we were basically locked out. I was lucky I had a US address, a friend in Texas, so it was okay. I could utilize it as a buyer. But I was like, one day this is going to come to Australia and we're going to absolutely jump on it instantly, because I know that it, just from a user experience based on all my previous dealings as a seller, this is going to be, an absolute behemoth. I remember early days, the auction button didn't used to be a slider either. I used to tap it because I remember buying something by accident, holding my phone, and it fell on my thumb. It was like bang, like 300 US in this NFL break. I'm like, oh God, it's like $600. I was like, I got to hold my phone a different way. And then it's great to sort of, have been a part of that evolution. And then now, you've got the swipe function, which I guess avoids that kind of thing. Is it's actually probably a good time to ask something like that. Is that feedback that's provided to you guys via users, or something that you just sort of, you're always looking to evolve and upgrade the user experience when something comes to the forefront?
Yeah, I think a couple things there. One, really most of the roadmap and how we think about building product comes from our users, and what's like the biggest pain points that our users have on a daily basis, and like how can we solve that? So like obviously Grant and I, think this is what we think is the best path for the company, and this is what we should be building. But really, honestly, that all gets dictated by users and feedback and continuous interviews. Like every single person at the company are required, regardless of role, to talk to our users. And we think that's a very important sort of thing to do, which really, one, gives you that glimpse into the pain points that our users have, whether it's buying or selling, to really sort of having the right idea of like what are the biggest problems and how can we solve them. And so, so like with that particular feature, it was a long time ago, but yeah, I think I remember, there was a lot of people who were saying their dog stepped on the phone or their kid hit the bid button. And so, the design team, which we have a really great design team, came up with a clever idea of why don't we do a swipe to bid? And so we were the first people to do that. And sure, there are other competitors who have copied our brilliant idea, but I see those things, as compliments. However, really to where we see things is like, follow what users are doing and how do we optimize that for them. And like a lot of things have happened because people are hacking Whatnot in a way that is not intended. So an example would be, before we had tipping, people would place, little like items where even though there wasn't a product, they'd send like something in the mail just so it would get delivered. But that's so like a user could could get tipped in a stream, even though there was no physical product. And so it was like, gift me something. And so, a lot of sellers are doing that.
I remember that. It was like support host one. It was like $5 or $10, $20 or something like that. I do recall that.
Exactly. And so everything that we build is really to solve some problem and make the experience better.
The product today, we know the journey up to now, but obviously to scale to the size that Whatnot is now, you had to have investors along the way. Do you want to talk through the investor process and what that looked like for Whatnot from the early days up to now?
Sure, I can briefly highlight it. So, Grant and I, when we started getting things off the ground, we raised a small amount of money, through, which is called a pre-seed. So it's before the seed stage, through an investor in, LA. And that was like, the goal with that money was like, hey, we could probably make this, if Grant and I pay ourselves nothing in terms of salary, last a very long time to prove something out. And that was kind of the hopes of it. Obviously, we were able to sell them on the dream of Funko Pops at the time, and I have no idea why, but we were able to. And so, yeah, I think that was very helpful. But one of the biggest unlocks for us, which, I talked a little bit earlier when I had my first sort of job and internship, is we actually got into Y Combinator, which, for Grant and I was one of the biggest things for us, not just in terms of helping us, but it was more like we've always dreamed of getting into Y Combinator. It was for us like a really big thing because we felt like we would be put around a group of peers and we would learn a lot that would really sort of push us in the right direction. And, we moved out to Mountain View. This was in January 2020. So about a couple months before everything shut down. And, that experience was hugely valuable for us. We got paired up with the right group partners. And I think, putting ourselves with other companies who are going through a similar thing, really just, allowed us to sort of say, hey, like we want to do things better and we want to sort of build something that's great. And I think the way that you think about building startups from a 0 to 1 aspect, and really not obsessing on the things that don't matter, and focusing on the things that do matter, really kind of helped us quite a bit. So yeah, and so that, they put in some money, and that's part of sort of the program, is they give you a check. And I don't know what it is today. I think they give you like $500,000, and then you have to go through the program, and it's a big thing. So I would Google Y Combinator. It's and back to my point of talking about like, having an idea and potentially executing it. I think, Y Combinator is a great program for anyone who has something, and anyone can apply. That being said, so we went through YC, and then, the thing around YC is at the end, you have this thing called demo day, which is where you present in front of a bunch of investors, and the hopes are to raise some sort of seed round. And we unfortunately were not able to do what we thought. One, COVID just hit, and so everything was shut down. And I think there was a lot of like fearfulness of what was going on in the market. But two, we don't think investors actually thought our business could be big, because they thought that we were just going to be a Funko Pop company, even though we knew we could get into multiple categories. But for us, it was about focus and not doing what like VCs think or tell you to do. We sort of said, this is what the right thing to do is, because the way that a lot of companies fail is they do too much at once. And so we wanted to be laser focused, prove out Funko, because there's still a lot more room to grow there, and then start thinking about a second category. Fast forward to today, we've raised a good amount of money, and it's really sort of to further our expansion, but also the way we think, Grant and I, which is maybe a little bit different than other tech companies, is like we are building a business, and so rather than burn money at all costs, hire 1 million employees, like that's not our ambition. Our ambition is to create something amazing for our users, but do it in a sustainable way. And obviously having cash helps sort of some of this growth, specifically because day one you can't necessarily be a profitable company, but maybe you can. But I think this just allows us to accelerate some of our investments quicker, specifically Australia as an example. But yeah, to date, we probably raised about $500 million.
That's actually a perfect lead into Australia and what is planned, because I think, it's Whatnot has been here for, what do we say, 7.5 weeks under beta, and I've watched it literally explode across every other platform. I don't believe there'd be very minimal Aussie streamers still using platforms that aren't Whatnot, right? Like that have been accepted. I know a lot of friends and guys that stream on Facebook or on Twitch and things like that. And as they get the approval to join Whatnot, that's like the place they go. Lee and I are an example of that. We used to stream on Twitch 3 to 4 times a week. I don't even know if I'm still logged into Twitch. You know what I mean? Like now we stream on Whatnot 5 to 6 times a week. So let's just dive into what can Australia expect post beta? And because I know that once the floodgates open, like I know there's going to be you're probably already getting hit with a ton of applications. I can imagine right now because people will see it.
Yeah, so for anyone who's interested in applying, I recommend going through the waitlist process. It'll say you have not been approved, but that just is something that we can look at. So when we do open up the waitlist, you will be able to start selling. And so really, what this looks like for us is we want to scale, but do it in a way that's not like super aggressive. And so, speaking of the wait list, we have thousands of applications right now. And so I think, me saying opening up the floodgates in January and just allowing everyone to sell, we probably will do this in batches. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, we just want to make sure like the product experience is great from the buyer and seller side. And we're not diluting anything in terms of the experience. But two, there's a lot of things that come when you sort of open up things that quickly, and that's more from a resource standpoint. So, as I mentioned, we're hiring a few people. We have someone on our team to the US, Binder, who's going to be coming out to Australia. I believe it's like now end of January. I can be wrong there, but then, he has another job in the US that he has to close out, on. And, but yeah, so he's going to go out, and I'm really excited about Binder because, versus hiring someone, just to like get things going, who's not really indoctrinated in our culture, like Binder is going to be able to be that person to sort of like groom them in the way that we work and how we think about market expansion and so forth. So what I would say is like what to look forward to on Whatnot is, we're going to invest in a little bit on marketing, more events. We're also going to, really get a couple categories working really well, which is like TCG and sports before looking into other categories. So I would say like that's probably for at least 6 months. And then you might see after that 6 months, we get into another category and another category, but really owning a couple of these categories and making sure we have a great experience. What I'm excited about too is like, what's interesting is in Australia, you have Facebook, you have all these other platforms, but what I think the value of Whatnot is and what it will do to the community is it's going to build a safer and more reputable community over time, because we have a lot of things that are built in the product that really weed out the bad actors. And so, when you have things that are kind of in this open-ended, internet where, people are selling, and I know you guys are reputable sellers, but like there's a lot of shit that's online. And I think the people that are going to Whatnot, whether they're buying or selling, can know that, we're never going to get anything perfect from the trust and safety side. But what I could say is that, the community is small, and the people who are going to use the product in the right way and really sort of be there to build a good business in a reputable way is the ones that are going to thrive, versus people who want to abuse the platform, which they don't just do it on our site. It's everywhere. And, we have sort of the accountability mechanisms that really sort of ensure that, buyers and sellers have a safe experience. And I'm very excited about that, and just kind of seeing what does that do to the other platforms that people are actually selling on, and do people prefer us as a result of not just having a better product experience, but also a safer experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the beta test so far is a testament to all of those things, without a shadow of a doubt. And even working with, some of the team, shout out to Josh. Josh has helped me. He's been a bit of a lifeline that I can sort of reach out and be like, hey, Josh, what about this? What about this? And he's like, oh, yeah, sweet, I'll do that. Change that over, bang, bang, bang. So it's nice to have a couple of people on the inside, which is handy. But in terms of even just through support and everything that I've reached out to or had customers reach out to, it's already been an insanely flawless user experience. Just compared to anything previous, it's really, really good, and the shipping is glorious. I worked with Alex and Josh on altering a couple of different things so that we could print more labels at once, and that just again is another testament. 1 or 2 emails to Alex, and bang, I had the shipping labels the way that I wanted them to be. And it's if you guys are doing that for us, then the buyer user sort of community can have the utmost confidence that they're also in good hands on the platform.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's good to hear. And Josh, Alex, all of them, they're great. So,
you have a phenomenal team. You have a phenomenal team, and like Lee and I said, we're the boots on the ground in Australia. We're here to help you whenever you need. But I think unless you've got anything else you want to add for the Australia release, there, Logan, I think Lee's got a bit of a rapid fire sort of questionnaire, which I'm looking forward to. It's always a bit of fun when he puts these together.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Logan, for joining us. I will just quickly jump in and say that it's been great to hear that, and definitely, boots on the ground. It's one of those in a rising tide, all boats rise type thing at the moment. All the streamers, all the community getting around it. So if the first 7 weeks is anything to go by, I can't wait for what the future holds. So, but I've got some rapid fire questions for you here. My first few are: would you rather? So, would you rather sleep in the same room as Gustavo with his loud snoring for 6 months straight, or you for 4 weeks you're back on the tools coding 16-hour days, 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. Which one would you rather?
I don't know who fed you this, but I rather be coding 16 hours a day than listen to Gustavo's.
We do a deep dive research. And when I saw Lee put that question, I had a giggle because I know where that came from as well.
All right. Would you rather be able to cook Michelin star meals every meal, but you can never ski again, or visit Montana Snowball every month where snow levels are great, but you can never cook again, and someone cooks for you and they're average meals?
Oh, this is an easy one. I rather ski. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't really care about, I mean, I like good food, and, Michelin star dining to me sometimes can be over the top, but yeah, I much rather ski and have mediocre food.
Speaking of skiing, do you still obviously it is a very passionate pastime for you. Do you still get to ski pretty frequently at the moment with everything, with the growth of Whatnot and all that? Do you still manage to squeeze it in?
I do. So, my plan is, for a couple months, I'll spend out in Montana and use the weekends to be able to ski a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important, even though, the team and everyone here, we're all working all the time, and to sort of have time to yourself. And so that's sort of my time to decompress and work out. And so, I work out every day, but I'm not going to go to the gym, during ski season. My gym is on the mountain. And so, I will plan on, doing a bit of it on the weekends because it's what I enjoy the most. And that's what gets me into a good state of mind.
All right. My next lot of questions are just rate out of 10. Okay. So you can add a little bit on the end, but I just want you to rate these things out of 10. All right. Grizzly bears.
7.
Why?
Did you see any? Well, because grizzly bear, Montana, I was thinking you'd see grizzly bears everywhere.
It's like Logan asking you to rate a kangaroo out of 10.
Yeah, and that's
well, yeah. Well, how would you rate it? No. I mean, a grizzly bear would be way cooler to see than a kangaroo. I'm not gonna lie, because kangaroos are everywhere. I saw a lot of them last trip.
Yeah.
And I've only seen one grizzly bear in my life.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with grizzly bears. I like rhinos, grizzly bears, killer whales. So I thought it was really cool.
Thought it was a bizarre one to lead with.
Well, he went to university in Montana. I was like, yeah, surely you've seen a grizzly bear somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Debugging a tough issue in your code.
1 to 10 on how much I hate it or like it.
How much you like it?
Depends on it. Maybe 5.
Oh, I guess it's a good point, right? As a coder, do you enjoy the creation of code or that debugging side of code more? Because I imagine one is kind of working out a puzzle, one is working out a puzzle that you didn't want to do, and the other one is working out a puzzle that's going to get you somewhere. So I'm assuming
exactly. I mean, I think that's a good way to put it. So
all right, Steve Aoki.
1.
Montana cinnamon rolls.
I've never had them, so...
What?
Really? That's all we hear about Montana. There's the cinnamon rolls are famous.
No, all I hear about Montana is Yellowstone.
I didn't know that, to be honest.
Well, yeah, the next one I was going to say is Yellowstone.
10.
Is Yellowstone National Park actually in Montana?
It's a part of Montana and Wyoming, so it's in both states. And so there's a section of it that goes through Montana. So the geyser, which is Old Faithful. I think actually that might be Wyoming, but there is a section of it that is in Montana. And then when you go through the park, you're just in between the two states.
It's a phenomenal TV show. I absolutely love it.
It's a phenomenal place and a even better TV show.
Oh, you're talking about the TV show?
Yeah.
4 on the TV show.
Okay. All right. I've got 2 more for you. Firstly, fly fishing.
So I haven't done it much, but the couple times I've done it, I give it a 7.
Lee has just sat there and gone, what are the most Montanian things possible that probably don't even relate to Logan, and just said, I'll rate this out of 10 and assume that you've done it. God, I really should have read over these.
Oh, man. I'm sorry. I'm just planning my next America trip, so I've got to know whether I'm going there or not.
Well, what are you going to do all these things?
Yeah. My last one for you is Post Malone.
Post Malone. I don't like his music much, but I can respect him as an artist. So I'll give him a 7.
He's pretty big in the collectible space too, right? He's big into Magic the Gathering. He bought that 1-of-1 ring that some guy found. So, he kind of plays in our space, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's also done like lots of charity things as well in the collector space. And he did the beer pong competition, which was quite entertaining as well to watch.
Really?
So yeah,
we had him on Whatnot a couple years ago, which was fun. It was a Magic the Gathering tournament, and so it was someone who, like one of our users, and I forget how we selected them. I think they won a contest to play Post Malone, and this particular person didn't know how to play Magic the Gathering, and so it was a competition between Post Malone and one of our users on who would win, and if he won, it was like, I think some cash prize, and he ended up winning. So
that is so good. That is, sign me up for the next one. I've never played Magic before.
There you go.
But I think that's pretty much going to be from us. I know that it's a time-sensitive sort of day. We could talk to you for hours, and we did talk to you for hours when we had the privilege of meeting you in person here in Australia when you were here for the initial sort of beta release. But we're very much looking forward to working with you and Whatnot in its continued growth phase over the next 6, 12, 24 months with all the amazing things that I know are to come. So thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to cover off before we let you get back to the busy life that I know you've got?
Well, thanks guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And as said, and I'm not just saying this, like super excited about Australia, and I'm excited to come back out hopefully early next year and hang out with everyone. But this is kind of my marketing pitch. If you have not used Whatnot, download Whatnot. I think you'll enjoy it, and then go check out for yourself. And I'm excited to continue to grow things in Australia and potentially launch more categories and the 2 categories we're in today. So
I can vouch for that. Every single one of you listeners out there, download the app right about now, because you won't regret it. It's a phenomenal platform. And you can find me and Lee on there. And it's great. We have a good time. We sell a lot of cool stuff. We get a couple of deals. Run a lot of giveaways. There's just so many aspects to the platform. I can't praise it enough. So thank you again, Logan. You've been a phenomenal guest, and we look forward to catching up with you next time you're down under.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Today's episode is brought to you by Collectfest, Australia's new and biggest collectibles festival, held here in Melbourne with over 300 stands, with many, many more to come. We've got some big exhibitors like the Royal Australian Mint, Kink Comics, Luna Cards, Anime Works, and many, many other small businesses.
These events are going to be held at the premier convention centres in each city and encompassing all collectibles from comics, video games, gaming, sneakers, trading cards, toys, and much more. If you can collect it, it will be there. Gary Hayes, King Pokemon, courtesy of Collectfest and us here at the Hobby Podcast, is actually going to be at the Melbourne show, and we have some super exciting announcements to come. You're not going to want to miss Gary's first trip down under. Melbourne, 5th to 6th of July, 2025. Brisbane, 26th to 27th of July. Sydney, 23rd to 24th of August.
So make sure you jump online, grab your tickets at collectfest.com.au. That's collectfest.com.au, and don't miss out.
This is going to be a phenomenal beginning for a new convention in Australia. I mean, the one in Melbourne is going to be held at the Melbourne Exhibition and Convention Centre. So we're super, super excited for that. We look forward to seeing you there. We will be there. What another... Oh God, I love our guest episodes, man.
They're always so fun, aren't they?
They are so fun. We are so privileged to have some of all the people on that we've had on, to be fair. They just give us their time. And somebody like Logan in particular, a co-founder of a multi-billion-dollar business, just set aside some time to have a chat to a couple of Aussie blokes.
Yeah, you got to pinch yourself, don't you? Shout out to Kara as well for helping set that up with all the timelines.
Yes.
Making sure that we were here on time, he was here on time. We know how busy his schedule is.
Yeah.
Take an hour out of his time to chat to us was really special. And, to everyone out there, we can't stress enough just how great the platform is.
It's great.
The user interface is like nothing else you would have seen in terms of buying for the sellers, end-to-end process.
Yep. We'll have a download link in the description. Follow that link. You will get some credit as well, some free credit to use on Whatnot. It's going to be a really exciting time over the next, 6 to 12 months to just watch it expand and develop. It's already been exciting to watch that in the beta phase and be a part of it. But I know as a long-time buyer on Whatnot, I do know sort of what's to come in terms of further categories and choice and all those sorts of things. So it's going to be a really, really exciting time. And thanks for your rapid-fire questions today. They just were phenomenal.
Rapid misses.
Oh, my God. Good laugh, though. Good laugh.
Like I said, I'm planning my next America trip, so
You're just like, should I go fly fishing? Do I want to go grizzly bear hunting? Do I want to eat, what did you say? Like
the cinnamon rolls.
Cinnamon rolls, like, you know. Oh, man. Yeah, it was, that was an experience. That was an experience. But, guys, you heard us talk about Gary on the last episode. There's going to be some more information coming on some things we're going to be doing with Gary while he's here. So make sure you go follow us on Instagram at @the_hobby_pod. And you will see the posts and some info and stuff go up there. So you don't want to miss it. So I guess on that note, that is wheels up and we are out of here.